Hello and welcome back to the SecurityMetrics podcast. My name is Jen Stone and I'm one of the principal security analysts at SecurityMetrics. Today we are very, very honored to be able to come to you from the PCI SSC community meetings in Europe. This year they're in Dublin, Ireland. Very excited about that. And the topic that we have for you today is, I think, very compelling because it's a change and people are still understanding, getting used to it, but it's about securing our software. So welcome to the show. I have with me today, Jake Marcinko. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you please tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. So obviously, Jake Marcinko, I am a standards manager at the PCI Security Standards Council, and I chair the PCI's Software Security Working Group and Software Security Task Force, which is responsible for a set of standards that we refer to as the Software Security Framework.
And I'm so glad that you had time to talk to me today because the SSF, which is short for the Software Security Framework, talking to different people around the world and in the U.S., they're confused about this, how it relates to the PA-DSS, and merchants too, not just the people who are trying to get their software certified, the people who are using it. So maybe let's start with the PA-DSS, and then what was that? What is the SSF? What is this transition? Just put it in context for us.
Sure. I think most folks that are probably familiar with PA-DSS and perhaps what its intent was. When PA-DSS was originally introduced, it was introduced with the intent to support PCI DSS. So it was a way for merchants who were purchasing point-of-sale systems. It was a standard that was around ensuring those point-of-sale systems had the functionality and capabilities, and as well as the protection mechanisms to protect PAN and SAD, with the intention, again, of those getting installed and maintained within PCI DSS environments.
Okay.
The difference with the software security framework is that we were shifting away from PAN and SAD-centric focus. So again, PA-DSS very much about protecting, payment account numbers and sensitive authentication data, whereas the software security framework is more about with the two standards. One of the standards, the secure software standard, is focused more on general data assets rather than specifically PAN or SAD. And the reason for that is because, we have so many different ways to process payments today versus, 10, 15 years ago where it was all tied to a PAN or an account number. Today we have tokens and, QR codes, all kinds of different methods for taking and processing payments. And so at least as far as the secure software standard is concerned, it's focused more on the vendor understanding what the actual data assets are, as well as the functional assets, so APIs, other types of capabilities and functionality within an application, as opposed to just focusing specifically on PAN or SAD. Now, the other standard, the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard, again, they're similar in nature to what PA-DSS was designed to, but rather than baking everything into a single standard, we opted to split out the concepts of software functionality and software capabilities from vendor software development practices. And so that latter aspect, vendor software development practices, it was now the focus of the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard. And again, that's and that one is more focused on the processes that vendors use to ensure that their applications are secure when they're developing them. So secure development practices, testing. Are they testing the software for vulnerabilities throughout the software lifecycle? Are they doing risk assessment? Are they looking at attack vectors? Are they continuing to evolve their protection mechanisms to address those? So all of those, originally in one standard in PA-DSS, focused very much on PAN or SAD. Now it's a broader focus, split into two different standards, one focused on software capabilities, the other on vendor software development maturity.
Okay. So sticking with kind of the merchant focus, which you were talking about a little bit earlier, one of the questions I get is, how do I know that the software I'm getting is secure? Because in the past, a lot of them would say, okay, I'm working with this company, I'm using their application, they give me the PA-DSS, I know how to, and then I could turn around and give that to my QSA or have that internal assurance that this payment software that I'm using is good. Now what do they ask for?
To who? The merchants?
From the merchant perspective. I want to use this payment application. How do I know this is a secure way to process payments in my environment?
Yeah, so we still do listings. I mean, that's one of the primary functions of the council is to work with the assessor community and have products evaluated against security requirements, and then those that have demonstrated that they meet those security requirements, we list those products and solutions on our website. So that concept is still the same, but I think the thing that's shifted a little bit is everyone. I think historically and perhaps they've been trained is to go to the applications or the products that are listed are somehow deemed secure.
Right.
And that's a very nebulous or subjective term. And so I think one of the things that we've tried to do with the software security framework is move away from the idea that hey, we're certifying these things as secure, to the idea that, well, we've certified these things to a set of requirements and a set of security requirements that we feel is important. What you do with that is the merchant's decision or whoever's implementing those solutions, and really trying to move away from this idea that just being listed on a listing is somehow you're secure, because at the end of the day you can take an application that's met all of these requirements and misconfigure it, and it's no longer secure. Right. So that's really what we're trying to be very explicit in conveying that idea that it's not identifying these applications as quote unquote secure. It's really, hey, these have met a series of requirements, and what you do with that is your responsibility. And we obviously continue to provide guidance on how to configure those applications in a secure way. Right. It's actually one of the requirements in Secure Software Standard that vendors have to do, is provide guidance to tell people how to implement that application or that software in a secure manner. So that's all still the concept, but I think the purpose of the listings have changed a little bit.
Okay, so the people who are actually looking at, the standards and looking at the software, so the people who are doing the certification of these things, are these people who do they have special training? Do they have special certifications? What does it take to become like an assessor of these standards? Yeah,
so we have the requirements to become we have two separate assessor types, naturally aligned with each standard and program. So we have a secure software assessor and a secure software lifecycle assessor, and each have different qualification requirements. But generally speaking, it's the secure software lifecycle assessor is probably more similar to the traditional PA-DSS assessor. So the qualification requirements are similar. You need to have, obviously, an auditing background. If you were a QSA, that actually is helpful, because the concepts that you're required to have or that you're required to know as part of the QSA program, very similar to secure software lifecycle. With that said, there are some additional requirements like understanding software development practices, and more so as you look at the secure software assessor, we expect the assessors to have skills in actually attacking an application. What are some of the common vulnerabilities? What are the common techniques that are used to attack applications beyond the traditional network-based attacks that most folks were focused on in general network security.
Yeah. So it's a pretty big change, and everybody, whenever there's a change, it's hard to adapt to the new way of looking at things or the new way of talking about the things. How do you see this new approach evolving? Are people going to be able to to kind of leverage this in their development of software or the software they use? Where do you see that going?
Again, the program is very much vendor focused, so it's focused on organizations who produce payment software and make those commercially available to the merchant community, for example. With that said, I think a key differentiating factor between the software security framework and the listings and PA-DSS is that beyond the fact that we're kind of broadening the focus away from just point of sale systems to now e-commerce systems, mobile platforms, embedded, all of the different ways that people are accepting payments now. In addition, and this was one of the reasons why we created the software security framework, was to create a central repository for software security requirements that other PCI SSC programs could then reference. Historically speaking, and as our portfolio of standards and programs has grown, historically we would have written and perhaps in many cases duplicated requirements that touch on similar concepts across different programs and standards. And one of the things that we really wanted to do with this was to have that in one place rather than duplicating that information across programs and standards and then just point back to the software security. So for example, we have the MPOC standard that references both secure software and secure SLC. So rather than duplicating requirements that talk about software security in the MPOC standard, it references back to the secure software and secure SLC standards for different components of an MPOC solution.
So really you're supporting the software developers, you're supporting the service providers that are creating this software.
Correct. But just beyond that also, I think you asked how other people might leverage this. Yeah. I think the two standards are based on common concepts that other software security frameworks and standards also focus on. So I think it could be used by internal software development shops to make sure that they're developing their internal applications that perhaps they don't sell, that they only use internally to make sure that they're developed securely, that they're configured securely, and that they're able to process payments or other functions that might support the payments ecosystem beyond the traditional payment transaction flow. So I think that's another key differentiating factor is, again, PA-DSS very much focused on the payment, accepting payment information, helping to facilitate that payment transaction. Software security framework, much broader than that. There are other aspects of software security that are relevant within the payments ecosystem that aren't necessarily tied to facilitating a payment transaction. Identity management solutions, 3D Secure, for example. There's the attestation and monitoring component within the MPOC standard. None of those really store, process, or transmit PAN, but it's something that supports the overall payment ecosystem. And those types of applications historically weren't eligible for validation to PA-DSS are eligible for validation to secure software because, again, it's more than just protecting the payment, the PAN or the SAD, but it's the overall protecting the ecosystem, not just the data.
Excellent. So you're giving a presentation this afternoon.
I am. Yep.
Very excited that I got to see a little preview of it. And one of the things that stood out for me in it was there are some software security principles. Can you maybe go over what some of those are?
Yeah. So and I'll talk a little bit about the presentation. I tried to do something a little. The last couple of years, I tried to move a little bit away from just talking hardcore technical concepts and kind of pulling back and trying to still convey those ideas and things that are important from a software security standpoint, but do it in a way that's a little bit more engaging and fun. And so the presentation today, what I've done is incorporated music into it, and as well as a guessing game almost to try and get the audience to participate in the presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to sneak out and go watch the presentation for sure.
So again, the presentation is focused on some new things that we've introduced in one of the standards, specifically what we refer to as Module C, which is an additional set of security requirements specifically for web-based software.
Okay.
but I'm doing it in a way and using musical analogies to help explain those security concepts and principles. So some of the principles, beyond talking specifically about what each of the 4 objectives within this new module C pertain to, also trying to take a step back and really just talk about fundamental software security perspectives, things like understanding that software security is a function of software quality, and a very important aspect of software quality. But then also pointing out that breaches don't happen necessarily because of just a single major event. It's usually, or a major flaw. It's usually a combination of several or perhaps many smaller things that, when combined together, can result in very significant issues and security flaws. So those are kind of the 2 principles: software quality and vulnerabilities, and then use kind of show how the 4 objectives in the new web software module, how they relate back to those key principles. So that's really what today's presentation about. And again, using musical analogy and lyrics and the inspiration behind songs and tying those concepts back to software security concepts.
Well, that sounds really interesting. And I like what you said about it's not one event that creates a security incident. And I think it's one of the reasons that I like the standards produced by the PCI SSC, because there is a defense in depth approach to protecting payment card data, but the transactions, and really even beyond that, when people take it seriously, the ability to even take a payment, because you can protect cardholder data but not be able to take a payment if the systems are in some way compromised.
Right.
And so I think that the standard from a PCI DSS perspective really helps support the secure software, and they all work hand in hand in that way.
Yep. Yeah, I think another a key differentiator between the software security framework and PA-DSS is we've and you're seeing this start to bleed into other PCI SSC standards and programs, is going back to PCI DSS and even PA-DSS. We were very explicit in what the security expectations were. In many cases, telling merchants or software or product vendors, you must do X, Y, and Z, and really prescribing the way something had to be done in order to achieve a positive security outcome.
Right.
Within the software security framework, we've tried as much as we can to move away from that concept and really just focus on the security outcome. So I think that's something folks who are in the process of transitioning from PA-DSS to secure software and secure software lifecycle, they'll notice that that we don't necessarily tell them how they need to go about achieving a specific outcome. Again, we're more focused on this is the security outcome we expect to achieve. You're going to have to prove that you meet that. How you go about that is up to you. Now, the benefit of that is that gives software vendors and software development organizations the freedom to decide what's best for their business practices in order to achieve a specific security objective. The challenge is more immature organizations. They're no longer going to have basically be told exactly what they need to do to meet that. And I think some organizations are struggling with that a little bit. And so fortunately, with our assessor community, I think our assessors, we've worked hand in hand with the assessor community to kind of convey what our expectations are from the council. Mm-hmm. And I think through that relationship, and then the assessors' relationships with the software development organizations and the merchants, they're able to help guide those organizations, particularly those that are struggling with understanding what's the best way to go about to meet a specific security requirement, security objective.
So anything kind of compelling or interesting to you in terms of things that are currently developing or some future-looking aspects of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we we just released an update to the secure software standard, I believe, back in May. And again, it was this is part of what my presentation is on, is to introduce this new module, the web software module, or module C. And again, it's an additional set of requirements specifically focused on e-commerce or web-based software. But we're already looking forward into continuing to evolve the software security framework. And so a big focus, and this is shown up in some of the updates to PCI DSS in version 4, is the focus on e-commerce attacks, digital skimming, the use of scripts within web pages and payment pages. And I think we're going to continue to evolve the software security framework to keep it pace with the set of common attacks or new attacks that are evolving and whatnot. And we're looking at again a statistic I heard recently is that now I believe it's over 60 or 65% of all application delivery now is cloud native applications.
I believe it.
And so again, we're going back to the PA-DSS days where everything was on a PC, that sitting on a desktop effectively, more towards cloud-based systems. And again, SaaS is not a new concept, but it's just continuing to go in that direction to where the majority of all applications. And so as the capabilities of these applications are evolving, so are the attacks. And so we're already looking ahead. We already have plans for how we're going to evolve the software security framework to continue to keep pace with these attacks.
Excellent. So if there are software development organizations out there that this is kind of new to them, they might be interested in going down this road. What's the best way for them to dip a toe in, get involved, and start going down this path?
Yeah, I think I think one important thing to point out is it's not just the council that's driving the focus on software security anymore. Certainly in Europe, there are evolving regulations, and more recently, at least in the U.S., the Executive Order 1428, which is really focused on driving software security into organizations that sell products to the U.S. federal government. You're starting to see this concept, evolve in other spaces. So
and market differentiation.
Exactly. So I just wanted to point out that it's not just the council that's driving this, but and again, this is a focus for the council as well. It's in everyone's best interest that we're focusing on the same thing. So we're not trying to do anything that these other organizations or these other frameworks and standards and standards bodies are focused on. We're all focused on the same thing, and so we're trying to evolve in a way that's consistent with the way that these other standards and frameworks are evolving. But getting back to your original question, what's the best way to learn about this? It's probably the best starting point is looking at our blogs. We have our blog articles on the PCI SSC website. We do have a number of different blogs specifically on the software security framework and software security in general. So you can filter or search on software security, and then you'll see all of our blogs on that. That's probably the best starting point because it gives you a very high-level concept about what the software security framework is, how it's different than PA-DSS, and what's it intended to focus on, and then evolve into looking at the actual documents that are associated with our standards and programs in the document library. So the standards, the program guides. We also have, it's fairly new. We've used it in other assessor-based programs like point-to-point encryption, but we also have what we call technical FAQs. And these are a little bit different than the FAQs you typically find on the website by searching. Those are more focused on general guidance. And we've actually said that those should be treated as guidance only, whereas a technical FAQ, it's a mechanism for the council to either provide clarifications or actually introduce new concepts or maybe not introduce new concepts, but certainly clarify expectations in a way that's a little bit more timely than having to wait around for another update
Right.
to the standard. And so we typically provide that guidance in a document, in what we call a technical FAQ, and it's intended as an extension of a standard and program. So if there's a misinterpretation that we notice through feedback, whether that's through RFC or just informal feedback that we receive from vendors, the assessor community, what we will often do is provide that necessary clarification in that technical FAQ. And then the expectation is that gets factored into future assessments. So that's another, I think, differentiation between the software security framework and PA-DSS is the adoption of technical FAQs.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I love that you give people a soft entry into it by recommending the blog post. I should start, changing how I introduce PCI DSS, which is what I'm usually associating with people on. And they'll say, well, how do I understand that? And I say, have you read the standard? That's mean because it's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
But having the blog posts of that softer entry, and that's one of the things I love about the PCI SSC website is that it is rich with information and of different levels, and people can really find information from different perspectives there.
We also have, I think it's worth noting that in addition to the website for our participating organizations, we have a global content library, which, video from my presentation today, will eventually end up on the global content library as well as other presentations.
Which is great because now that we've talked it up so much and people are like, well, I'm not there. How am I supposed to see it? It's going to be on that.
Exactly, yeah. So that's another great resource I think that's worth noting too. And a lot of that's another way to get exposed to some PCI standards and programs without necessarily having to dive straight into the technical details that are articulated in the standards.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to our listeners today and give us a little insight into secure software development. It's I know that there are a lot of questions about it, and I think this is going to answer many of them.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of SecurityMetrics podcast, click on the box on the left. If you prefer to listen to this podcast, it's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. See you on the slopes.